Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL Draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Prospect Corner presented by the Hockey Writers. Today, we're going to be taking a look back at the 2023 NHL Draft, which just went down this last week, and we're going to share our thoughts on all that transpired. I'm your host, Logan Horn, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts and fellow prospect analysts, Matthew Zator and Peter Baracchini. How are things, Matt?
Doing good. Like when we're recording, it's free agent frenzy getting crazy, but that's not what we're gonna be talking about. The draft is great. I like we did our reaction first round. I mean, no trades, but still a lot of different picks that were a little surprising. And then once we got into day two, there was more surprises about where guys went, and we'll talk about it. But yeah, it draft, but it goes way too fast. I mean, we have so much prep, and then it's done in 2 days. It's like Christmas. Do all the decorations and your tree, and then all of a sudden, it's after a couple of days, you're like, oh, it's over again. But that's the draft, and then we'll be talking about 2024 like next week, probably
very soon. Yeah, absolutely. I can relate it. It was like a year of build up, and then it's like, oh, it's done. So it's over. All right. Well, yeah. But it was a ton of fun, and we're going to get into tons of conversations about that here today. Peter, you were actually at the draft in Nashville. How are you doing? How are you recovering?
Recovery is a little bit slow right now, feeling the effects, but it was a blast. I will say that, being at the actual event, touring the city, checking out all the bars and everything, it was definitely something. Nashville knows how to party. That's definitely an understatement right now.
Yeah, absolutely. From what I heard of media people and then also GMs up on stage in the first round, it seems like everyone was enjoying the nightlife in Nashville.
Definitely.
Some Tootsies references every like 40 minutes during the first round, it felt like. All right, well, we'll get right into it here. And I just want to talk about the top 10 this year. So no surprise at one, we had Connor Bedard to Chicago. The Ducks, it started to seem like a possibility, and then on the day of, it felt like, oh, maybe it's Leo Carlsson at 2, and that's ultimately where they went. Third overall, you had Adam Fantilli, Will Smith 4, and then David Reinbacher, Dmitry Simashev, Matvei Michkov, Ryan Leonard, Nate Danielson, and Dalibor Dvorsky. So that's roughly the top 10 group that a lot of us had. I think that's, except for Simashev, that was my exact top 10, just in a weird order. So Peter, I'll come to you first. What are your thoughts on the top 10? Any surprises there for you? Something weird looking back at it already?
I mean, I think the two ones that stand out is David Reinbacher going to 5, but that kind of seemed like, a direction that was going similar to Leo Carlsson as well. But Dmitry Simashev going in the top 10, that was very interesting, because considering how they could have probably had him at 12 and take somebody like, Matvei Michkov, Leonard, Danielson, Dvorsky, one of those players up front would have probably been a better option than have Simashev outside the top 10 and inside the top 15. That to me is the biggest one. It was definitely, I really thought that Dalibor Dvorsky in the top 10, it was most likely going to happen as well. Probably would have taken him a little bit higher up. I thought he would have been a good fit for, Philly, Washington, but, Philly was dead set on getting Michkov. We heard his comments, how he wants to build a team up and turn them into a contender. So there's a good fit right there. But yeah, I think Simashev is the one question mark as well. And again, sorry, Habs fans, kind of similar to Shane Wright last year, getting Slafkovsky. I know you probably wanted Michkov, but getting David Reinbacher is not a bad thing at all. I mean, he was a top defender in this draft for a reason. The mobility, the smarts, the two-way game, the ability to play with men is going to go well for him when he makes that transition over to the NHL.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Simashev pick is certainly the interesting one in the top 10. It seems like, from what I've heard since the pick, the gap between what teams thought of Simashev and what the public thought of him was even bigger than we thought. And there were quite a few teams who had him as the top defenseman on their board. And Arizona could have been one of those teams. And they wanted to make sure they got, at very least, one of their top 2 guys in the class. So they took him at 6. No guarantee he would have been there at 12. I don't think Vancouver would have worried you taking him early. St. Louis maybe could have taken him if he was on their board pretty high. But yeah, they just didn't want to risk it. They took the 2 big Russians early, with Daniil But being the other. But the real interesting thing about that to me was that Matvei Michkov was not the first Russian drafted. He wasn't even the first Russian.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild. And if he turns out the way that, is certainly a possibility for him, and he's an elite offensive talent in the NHL, 7th overall is going to be a steal looking back. So that could be a fun one to watch, fun storyline. Matt, what are your thoughts on the top 10? Did it go kind of how you thought? Any surprises? I mean, Simashev, but
well, I gave a bit right after in our first round reaction, so I won't go crazy into it. But yeah, Simashev was my surprise at the top 10. I mean, all the other guys are like, yeah, for sure. Danielson, we talked about being in the top 10. So I mean, it's not a surprise he went. Michkov, yeah, I mean, I thought he'd probably go in that top 10 range. So I mean, going to Philly was interesting. I mean, I kind of thought Montreal may have gone that direction and grabbed him, but they were set on Reinbacher, and that's an awesome pick. I all this stuff that's going on Twitter and about the pick, and it's not bears mentioning because it's just ridiculous. But Reinbacher is going to be an amazing top pairing defenseman for the Canadians, and they're building a pretty good defense core out there, I think, and that's Reinbacher is going to be a really good piece for their rebuild. So I mean, I love the pick. I mean, you called it being in our mock draft, and there you go. So I like the top 10. We'll talk further about where all these other guys went, but overall, I wasn't really surprised about anyone except for, like I said, Simashev.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might be a little too far to say it was a surprise that Leo Carlsson went too, but it definitely wasn't expected. And that's most likely just kind of the North American bias that we have. Because all throughout the year, Leo Carlsson kind of didn't get the shine he probably deserved for playing so well in a really, really strong pro league. So this is no fluke. He's a very, very talented player. And 2nd overall makes a lot of sense for him. So next, I want to chat about some risers and fallers. So Peter, I'll come to you first again here. Who are some guys that maybe rose or fell in the draft this year that you're a little surprised by?
I know we're going to talk about our respective teams later, but the biggest one is definitely Easton Cowan for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Obviously, like, not just because I cover him, but at the same time, it's because many thought of him as, kind of that late 2nd, early 3rd round pick. But from what I was hearing on the draft floor, and even with other members of the media, and when I talked to Wes Clark as well, director of amateur scouting, there was a good sense that there were teams behind the Maple Leafs that Cowan was high on their radar as well. There was potential, and he had a strong second half. He progressively got better throughout the season and into the playoffs for the London Knights. And, the Maple Leafs could have traded down. There probably were trade partners, but nobody was, budging because of how deep of a draft this is, how they wanted to keep their picks. And that's understandable. So Toronto took the swing and got the guy that they wanted. And that's a big thing because he's got a lot of potential. He's got a hound dog mentality, or hounding mentality, as he calls it, when he was in that media scrum, where he's just relentless on the puck. And even Wes Clark described it as having a high motor, high energy, and smarts on and off the puck. Though that's the kind of player that the Maple Leafs wanted. I know there are probably other players with higher upside, but the projection for Cowan, he had 50 points a season. It's not great, or it may not look great, but there's a chance that he could pop off being with the Hunters again in London, being a leader and getting more minutes and ice time. I think you're looking at a player that could be a top scorer in the OHL next season. It's definitely a possibility. We saw what happened with Luke Evangelista. Similar trajectory, average draft year, popped off right after that. Needs to get bigger, needs to get stronger. He knows that, but potential is there. As for fallers, I just wanted to quickly go there. As for fallers, still really upset that Riley Heidt fell to just inside this, or just out, barely into the third round. I don't understand why. He's got the work ethic, the mentality, the skating, the edge that, you know, he has for a smaller player. I think that would have been really well, or bode really well for him to improve his stuff, because he has that, you know, killer mentality or whatever. So seeing him drop was still the biggest thing for me. And yeah, I wish I had an answer for that, and I really don't, because he was a top 15, top 20 guy for me.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he was the kind of consensus first rounder that fell the furthest, mostly due to size, most likely. Yeah, where did he go? He went to 64th,
64th
to Minnesota.
Yeah, that's
which is just like the perfect Minnesota pick there. And I heard that Judd Brackett, one of their, can't remember if he's their director of amateur scouting, or he's somewhere in their scouting staff, and he used to work for the Canucks, was just pounding the table for Height at 64. And someone joked that he was doing backflips when they picked him. So they're clearly very happy with that pick, and I would be too if I was them, because that seems like a steal. Matt, I'll come to you here. Who are some risers and fallers throughout this draft that stick out?
Well, riser for me, Adam Guyan, going 35th, first goaltender off the board, which is amazing. We've talked about Harabel, Augustine. They didn't go very far after him, but Guyan going first was, I mean, we talked about him being in that group, but I don't think any of us thought he was going to be the first goaltender off the board. So Chicago Blackhawks getting him. And I mean, he did a great job at the World Juniors, being that top goaltender. He's a really good goalie, and rising up to just inside, like really early in the second round is amazing, because he was an overager, right? So, I mean, getting that high is pretty great. So, and the goaltenders just kind of strung right after that. There's a lot of goalies taken right after him. Harabel, Augustine, Bjarnason all went pretty soon after. Damian Clara as another riser. He went to the second round to the Anaheim Ducks. So that's another, I think, a riser. I don't think he was really rated to go into the second round. We did talk about him being a riser, but going that high is pretty good. So the second round was pretty dominated by goaltenders. So
lots of goalies.
For fallers, my biggest one is Riley Height was going to be mine, and Andrew Crystal dropping to 40th overall. I read a piece on the Capitals mock draft, and he had him going to the Capitals in the second round, and I'm like, I was just about to send a comment to him like, I don't think he's going to the Cap. He's not dropping that ball. Then I'm like, well, maybe he'll drop that far. And look what happened. So he went to the Capitals, which is a great pick for them. There's a first round talent right there, going early in the second. So actually not even early. That's closer to, maybe that's still pretty early. But yeah, I think Crystal is a faller. And then I'm not going to say Gavin Brindley, because really we talked about him maybe falling into the early second, and that's what happened. And he's my pick for later on. So I'll leave it at that right now.
Sure. Yeah. I do want to mention, I love that the Blue Jackets, after getting Fantilli at 3, which was huge value, they got his teammate Gavin Brindley in the second round. They seemed super pumped to be on the same team again. And I really hope that Brindley has an NHL career in Columbus. It'd be a ton of fun to see them together again. Also, this morning as we're recording, Adam Fantilli has signed his entry-level contract with Columbus, most likely going to spend the year in the NHL, which is something we kind of expected, but it seemed like the Blue Jackets were very high on him, really expected him to make the team this year right after selecting him. So shouldn't be too much of a surprise, but that's some news there. I'll say for risers, Charlie Stramel went a little earlier than I would have expected, although like a year ago, he was maybe a top 10 pick. So not shocking that he went in the early 20s instead of kind of the 30 range where we might have expected him to be. Really tough year, but he's a big physical center, skates pretty well. If he has a bounce back year offensively, then this looks like a great pick again. Someone who rose even less, but I just think is interesting, is Mikhail Gulyayev into the first round with Colorado. Feels like a Colorado pick, someone who in a few years can slot into their lineup as an undersized, really smooth skating, really offensively skilled defender. And then Brady Cleveland, who the Red Wings drafted in the middle of the second round. I think I had him in my third or fourth round area towards the end of the year. Really physical, like maybe one of the hardest hitters in the draft. Really big, skates all right, but he does not think the game super fast. He doesn't really have a ton of skill with the puck. So I think your ceiling there is kind of like a Ben Sherratt type if you're lucky, which clearly Detroit likes because they just signed Ben Sherratt a year ago. But I don't know. That was a bit of a reach for me. Some quick followers. Obviously, Riley Heidt was on my list. Timur Mukanov went a lot later than I expected. Well, I knew he could slide because he's 5'8", but he's super skilled. So that was a big swing there that I value. And then the player that I haven't shut up about all year, Aiden Fink for the Brooks Bandits. Once it got to like the 6th and 7th round, I was like, okay, he should have been drafted by now. I understand he's a little shorter and he played in a league that doesn't get a lot of attention. But then the 7th kept going, and I'm like, is he even going to go? Like, he might not get drafted. And then there was the whole hubbub around the Predators trading to get a pick, and is David Poyle's final pick as the general manager, and it kind of overshadowed the pick they made. But they selected Aiden Fink with, what is it, pick 218, one of the final picks in the draft. I think that's huge value at the end of the 7th round. No guarantee he's going to be an NHL player, but I think he's got a ton of skill, a really good shot, and a real chance. So that was a bit of a faller, but I think a good pick there for Nashville. If you guys have any that stick out, who are some guys that went undrafted you were maybe a little surprised by? One guy we thought might go undrafted that didn't is Thomas Milic, finally got drafted to Winnipeg. But anyone who went undrafted that sticks out? Matt, I'll come to you here.
Well, first of all, congrats to Milic getting drafted. I love it. I mean, when Winnipeg was like, yes, I jumped. I'm like, yes, finally.
Yeah.
So that's great for him. For surprising, Masden Leslie not getting drafted. Like everyone, I'm like, come on, Carolina, come on. Or Tampa Bay. I'm like, some of these teams that just pick guys, it's like, whatever. 7th round pick, like take them. But not very good defensively. That's his biggest knock. And he's not that physical. So, I mean, there's your two things that he may be a guy that they'll get drafted next year to see what he does in development. Yeah. So, I mean, he was one. And then Ty Halliburton, another guy, I was really surprised didn't get drafted because, I mean, I think he's going to end up being a really good 3rd, 4th line center. But again, could be that some teams just saw some deficiencies they didn't like and want to see more of them before they draft him even in the 7th round. And I'm of the belief, just take a swing. I mean, it's a 7th round pick. These guys are probably not going to make it anyway. Just whatever. But I mean, I'm not in the scouting, not in these departments. They have guys higher on their lists, but those two for me really stick out as guys that I had. And of course, not just it was because I wrote their prospect profiles. I knew a bit more about them. And I really wanted them to get drafted. So those two guys for me.
Yeah, those are fair ones. It's tough to see guys fall and not make it into the draft, but all it takes is every single team having just one player higher than you. That's all it takes at every pick. So you can slide pretty quick, unsurprisingly. Peter, anyone that went undrafted that you're a little surprised by?
Well, speaking of goalies, Thomas Sahanek.
Yeah.
Really would have thought that he would have been picked. I mean, simple as that. The way that he almost not single-handedly him, but the way that he almost took down Team Canada at the World Juniors, 934 save percentage, 5-2 record, and even his production in the WHL wasn't that bad. 912 save percentage, 305 goals against. 12 wins and 14 losses for the Tri-City Americans, and they were kind of middle of the pack within their conference. So I thought that maybe he did enough to try and secure a team's attention and, let them know that, hey, I'm available to be a potential goalie option for you in the future. 6'2", 181, may need a I mean, he's got decent size to fill out the net. So I'm kind of surprised there. And the other one is Jordan Tourney. Really thought that he had some upside as a puck moving defenseman, two-way game, but there hasn't been much defensive consistency in his own zone. And maybe teams kind of similar to like Halliburton, maybe they're not seeing a whole lot from him to distinguish him as a pick or even worthy of a pick this year. But he did have some offensive upside, and I thought that maybe that they could try and round out his game and let him, develop a little bit more, let them know that you got to improve it within your own end. Hopefully next year is another year and he takes that to heart and comes out as, a potential overage pick for another team, because maybe this season he may just not have had enough to impress the scouts. Hopefully next year is the year.
Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of guys that kind of surprised and fell. One for me is Oscar Asplund. Kind of thought he was going to get a chance. He's a 19-year-old, so he's been passed over before. I think he's got one more chance in the draft. But if he doesn't go there, I guarantee you he'll be a highly sought after European free agent just down the line a little bit. As a 19-year-old, he's an offensive defenseman, really good puck mover. Skates well, passes well. He had 30 points in 49 games in Allsvenskan this year, which is a second-tier pro league in Sweden. Kind of thought that would be enough for him to get a shot in the draft, but no dice. So we'll see if that's coming down the road for him. It looks like he's going to play in the SHL next year. So if he maintains that production or just takes a slight hit while going up to a much stronger league, then I think he'll have a pretty good shot. But I thought he had a good shot this year, so who knows? All right, we're going to take a very quick break here, but we'll be right back after a quick word from the hockey writers.
Interested in writing for the Hockey Writers? If you have experience writing about hockey, are passionate about the sport, and are looking to take your writing to the next level, the Hockey Writers could be the place for you. Here at THW, you will have the opportunity to hone your craft at one of the world's largest and most respected hockey publishers. You will have control over what you write, be able to seek out media credentials, and be supported by a large network of writers and editors. Plus, you'll get paid for doing it. If you're interested and want to know more about team openings and requirements, please visit the Write for THW page on the Hockey Writers website. A link to that page is also listed in the description.
All right, so we'll continue our quick look back here at the 2023 draft. And I want to hear who your biggest winner is of the 2023 draft among teams. So who do you think did the best throughout the draft? Matt, I'll come to you first for this one. Who do you have winning?
There's a few teams that did really well. I want to really focus on the Columbus Blue Jackets because they did overall their draft class, and not just because they have a bunch of players I really like. There's part of it, but Adam Fantilli going first, and then you're going. That's a big one. I mean, I don't think they expected to have him. I mean, Leo Carlsson would have been great as well. Not like that would have really changed much, but getting him is amazing. He's going to play in the NHL next year, it looks like. And then Gavin Brindley going second round. There's another high skill, high work ethic. I love Gavin Brindley, so I'm going to mention him again later on. He's great. And then William Whitelaw, another favorite of mine, going in the third round. There's another high skill, high work ethic. Columbus Blue Jacket, I think these guys really fit for what team it looks like they're trying to build. High skill. So I mean, those three alone make it good. And then Andrew Strathman going in the fourth, that's a pretty solid pick going down in the fourth round. So I mean, just those picks, and Luca Pinelli too. I mean, they got him in the fourth round as well. And overall, the Columbus Blue Jackets walked away from this draft with a lot of skill, a lot of high motor type players. So the Blue Jackets for me are definitely a winner walking away from this one.
Yeah, absolutely. They got a ton of skill there. A handful of guys on the short side where it's kind of going to be like coin toss to see if they are going to be able to make it or not. But if they do, there's some really talented players there, and I like a lot of those picks as well, Matt.
They're not afraid of going.
Clearly not.
Nick Blankenberg was another guy they signed, undrafted guy, undersized. Looks like he's pretty good in the NHL so far. So they're not afraid of getting these guys, right? So,
which is fair because these are draft picks, and past like the top 20 in the first round, like you're kind of just throwing darts.
Yeah.
Like really, there's not a ton of certainty past there. So swing on high talent. I love it. Great pick there, Matt. Peter, what about you? Who's a big winner for you in the 2023 draft?
I mean, the Chicago Blackhawks, but not for the reason that you think, just taking Connor Bedard. But that does play a factor in it. But the fact that I was absolutely not, as soon as Oliver Moore was still on the board when the Hawks were coming up for 19, I'm like, if they take Oliver Moore here, that alone is a win in itself. Lo and behold, they took Oliver Moore, and you have a future center depth of Connor Bedard and Oliver Moore. Obviously, I think Moore does have a ceiling as a first line center, but still anchoring a second line for the Chicago Blackhawks in the future is definitely nothing to sneer at, because he has the same kind of pace that Bedard plays at. He's very quick, agile, great hands, great work ethic and motor. I really thought that was a steal in the first round, because he probably should have been a little bit higher up, maybe knocking on the door at top 10. Really, really like that selection. But even after that, obviously Adam Gajan, because of the season that he had and what he was able to do for Slovakia at the World Juniors. Roman Kanserov was, decent pickup. But after that, Nick Lardis in the third round, he's been on the rise. I thought he did really well to improve his stock, and it definitely caught the eye of the Blackhawks to be an early third round selection. And Alex Ferrand, I had him at 103 overall, and the Hawks took him 99. So few spots back of where I initially had him. High energy, great work ethic, two-way play on both sides of the puck. He's got really great smarts. I think that he's going to be a very complementary piece to their depth in the future. And even signing like Marcel Marcel, not signing Marcel Marcel, but drafting Marcel Marcel. There you go. He's your boy right there. He looked really good at the U20s as well. Steady season with the Gatineau Olympique. And, I thought that could be an underrated move for them. So Chicago's my winner of this draft, because of everyone else that fell behind Connor Bedard.
Yeah, that's a great pick there as well. I mean, Bedard and Moore, you could probably just cut them off there and just like press random on the central registry when you have to like submit your pick, and they probably would be a winner. I do want to point out, I'm not saying this is bad or that it's not going to work, but Connor Bedard, Frank Nazar, Oliver Moore, that's three sub 6 foot centermen that they've taken in the last year. It's unlikely that all of them stick at center. However, if at least one of them does, you're doing pretty well, because the other two would be excellent on the wing. So I'm not saying it's a problem. I just think it's something that they will need to address someday, probably. Maybe they'll just get a bunch of big wingers or something, because that's something NHL teams would do probably. But those are teams that I definitely think are winners. So I'm just going to go with next up on mine. So I give someone new, and that would be the Philadelphia Flyers. Like I mentioned earlier, Matvei Michkov at 7th overall could go down as the best pick in this draft, possibly. Like he genuinely could be a superstar in the NHL. I'm not saying he will be, but he could be. Really great swing for a team that seems to be starting to tear things down. Probably going to be bad for a year or two. And then once they're trying to put it back together again, they're just going to get like a star on an entry-level deal in Michkov, which would be huge. So I think that was a great pick. Oliver Bonk in the first round was an okay pick. I expect he'll probably end up as like a second pairing guy, a decent second pairing guy, which is good. Not great, but it's good. Carson Bjarnason on day 2 was good. Denver Barkey, Alex Ciernik, Carter Sotheran. Like there's a lot of talent they added here. Some guys with a real shot to be in the NHL in 4 years or so. So I like this draft a lot for Philly. First draft with the new management group there. And I think they already had a lot of goodwill from Flyers fans, but I think this draft only furthered that and only made that deeper. So I think this is a great year for them. We're going to go to the other side now. And you can take it however you want. If you want to go with a team that made some reaches, or even just a team that didn't have a lot of picks to begin with. But who's kind of a loser out of the 2023 draft? Peter, I'll come to you first this time. Who do you see as a bit of a loser coming out of the draft this year?
I I don't know. There are quite a few teams that stick out. One of them is definitely the Boston Bruins. Obviously, they've had 5 picks, not a whole lot, but when they were in the third round, they took Christopher Pelosi when there's the possibility that they could have had, Jaden Perron, a Denver Barkey, Andrew Strathman, Alex Ferrand, as we mentioned, Cole Knuble. There were probably other players that they probably could have taken early on. And even with Beckett Hendrickson, there were guys that they probably could have taken a bit of more of a chance on. I know they're probably like looking to address, size and everything like that, because Hendrickson's 6'2", the Pelosi's 6'2", 185. So they're adding size, but is the upside going to be there? That's going to be the big thing for me. So I know when you get to the mid rounds, it's a little bit more of a, who are you going to bet on the most? And maybe that's who they think is going to give them more value later on. But it remains up in the air at this point.
Yeah, for sure. Like, obviously, you come into the draft with just a few picks and none of them are early at all. You're not expecting to get a ton of talent out of it, but it doesn't feel like they really use those picks the best either. I'd agree with you there, Peter. Matt, what about you? Any other teams you see as kind of a loser out of this draft?
I mean, yeah, like Peter said, there's a few. I'm really, even though Easton Cowan looks like he could become something, I think Toronto's kind of a bit of a loser in my mind, because you get a first round pick for that Rasmus Sandin trade, and then you go for a guy that may or may not hit. I mean, the thing is like I said in the first round reaction, they've got guys close to where he plays at London Knights, so they have a bit more insight than we do. So I mean, it's like they think he has high upside. That's great, pick him. But could they potentially have done a trade to get a second round pick or whatever, and then draft him there? If you're really high, I mean, maybe they thought another team was going to pick him up. I mean, that could be it too. But then, really, when was their next pick? Trying to scroll with it. Yeah, fifth. Once you jump all the way to the fifth round, I'm not saying that Cowan would have been available down there, and he wouldn't have been, because I think he probably was going to go in the second round or something. But I think they could have made a trade, maybe grabbed a second round pick in there, another third or whatever, and then draft him in the second round. Reaching to get him there, where they could have picked up maybe a higher upside guy there. So for me, the Maple Leafs are a bit of a loser in my mind.
Yeah, that's a fair one. It's really wild to see a year with no trades during the first round. Seemed like teams were just very set in who they wanted and did not want to chance it for whatever reason. I'll mention for a loser, I have the Dallas Stars. Obviously, again, a team without any early picks. But when you have 6 picks going into the draft and the best prospect you come out of it with is Tristan Bertucci, who I'm not super high on, to be honest, but also being generous, I don't see him being anything more than a third pairing defenseman at best. Similar possible projection for one of their later picks, Aram Manedian out of the NTDP, which those are both fine picks. They're not bad picks by any means. Those are the best players they got for sure. But when you have 6 picks and you come out of it with 2 guys that might make your NHL lineup, that's not great. Obviously, tons of time for all these players to improve and to prove me wrong, and I hope they do. But it does not seem like Dallas really came out with a ton on the other side with that many picks. So they're going to be a team on my loser list here. And one last player on the draft on a whole is a potential steal. So give me someone that you think we'll look back on as a steal, or we could look back on as a steal in a few years. Peter, I'll come to you first.
I know I said Riley Heidt before, but I'm going to leave him off the table because I already know how I feel about that. I am going to pick a trio and combine them from the second round from the Seattle Kraken: Carson Rakoff, Oscar Fisker-Molgaard, and Lucas Dragicevic. because you have a potential strong top 6 power forward in Rakoff. You have a solid middle 6 option centerman in Oscar Fisker Molgaard that's kind of like Marco Kasper, where he has that energy, drive, and work ethic. And you have one of the best puck movers in the draft, and Lukas Dragicevic. Now, the big knock on him is his defensive game and his skating. Skating, you could work on that. Is his defensive game going to come around? He certainly thinks that that's going to be the case. And I guess the Kraken do as well, because took them with their last pick in that round. So the fact that they came away with 3 high upside players, I know I'm probably breaking the rules here instead of picking just one, but I think you have 3 potential steals right there that can, be a significant impact with their young talent coming forward, where you already have, Beniers up. Shane Wright's going to be coming up very soon. You even look at Ty Nelson, David Goyette, a lot of those players as well. There's like potential pieces for your future that can have a significant impact, and those 3 are definitely going to be a part of that.
Yeah, totally. The Kraken did really well in this draft, I think. It's just their second year in the NHL, and their earliest pick was 20th overall, but they took a swing on Shala there. And then, they did really well in the second. I agree with you there. Fisker Molgaard feels like a good bet to line up down the middle in the bottom 6 behind Beniers and Wright, like you mentioned there, Peter. And Dragicevic, was kind of wild to see him fall that far. It tells you how nervous teams were about his defensive game. But feels like a good pick there for Seattle as well. I like those a lot. I'll allow it, even though you picked 3, but it's fine. Matt, what about you? Any potential steals from this draft that come to mind?
Well, I won't. I mean, maybe not. I mean, Gavin Brindley probably won't be a steal in the early second round. I mean, if he hits, the second round is really great. So I won't pick him, even though I love him. Cam Allen going in the 5th round. Like we've said before, he was a potential top 10 pick. Not that long ago, he drops all the way to the 5th round to the Washington Capitals. We get another one, like Andrew Crystal, they got in the second round. They grab Cam Allen way down here. He could end up being could be the steal of this draft. I mean, because if he does hit his potential, like a lot of people thought when he was in that top 10 range, I mean, he may have just had a bad year, and that's possible. So I mean, he ends up coming, next year, all of a sudden he returns to what he was, and the Capitals have a potential top 4 defenseman at their disposal, and they draft him in the 5th round. So Cam Allen's my one, even though there's quite a few other guys. Jaden Perron's another one that dropped off, and of course the Carolina Hurricanes pick him. That's a Carolina Hurricanes pick through and through. But Cam Allen's my one. I think is going to end up being a really, really good pick this late in the draft.
Yeah, that's a great call there. We talked early in the year about like, oh, he might even fall into the 2nd round. And then now he went in the 5th. So pretty steep fall off for him there. But just to bounce back to exactly where he was a year ago, not anymore. And that's already looking like a valuable pick. So could be a steal for Washington there for sure. I'll mention, obviously, Aiden Fink is someone I believe is a steal very late in the 7th round, one of the last players taken. But I also want to mention his teammate that we'll talk about in a moment, Hudson Malinowski, drafted by the Maple Leafs in the 5th round. I like that pick. Thomas Milic in the 5th round to Winnipeg could be a bit of a steal, because you know how much we love Milic in these parts. And then lastly, someone else that I've talked about a bunch, Timur Mukunov, very small Russian forward, taken 163rd by who else but the Carolina Hurricanes in the 6th round. He's certainly a home run swing, because there's a chance that his size just really stops him from being an effective pro player, at least in North America. But he has a ton of skill, and if he puts it together, getting a good player like him in the 6th round would be huge for a team that doesn't need that help in Carolina. But they're happy to take the risk anyway. Okay, quickly before we wrap up here, I wanted to just give each of us a moment to talk about the teams we write for and their draft class. So, Peter, I'll come to you first and give you a chance to just share your thoughts on all the players taken by Toronto this year.
Yeah, and it's difficult to get an assessment on it when you only have 3 picks. And you know what?
Sure.
I do agree with Matt. Toronto was very close in being a loser for me because of the fact that, the Easton Cowan pick could have been a little bit more not necessarily a safe one, but you getting a player with high upside like Gavin Brindley. You know, I was talking with a couple of people. You could have had all these players that have more upside than Cowan, but again, we don't know what's going to happen. But you know, he has that work ethic and drive. This team values that. Same with Malinowski. I know he was one of your favorites this year, Logan. And the big thing with when Wes Clark talked was the Maple Leafs bet on players that thrive in big situations. So Cowan getting progressively better and even into the playoffs. Malinowski, same thing with the Bandits. And I'm still surprised that he went ahead of Aiden Fink. That's still pretty shocking, but maybe the Maple Leafs value that because he does have a little bit more of the size, the playmaking ability. His shot is very underrated as well because I've seen him rip the puck at that World Junior A Championship. He can definitely find the back of the net, and even in the playoffs too, he had a strong performance. May not look like it with 7 points in 15 games, but still effective in being a secondary scorer. And if he knows that he needs to get bigger and stronger too, like he needs to work on a lot of things, he knows that the work doesn't stop there. So I like that mentality that he has. And same with Noah Chadwick. You know, they like his puck moving abilities. And again, he only had 20 points a season, but this was his first full season in the WHL. You know, chances are next season he's going to capitalize and improve on those 20 points. And the year after that, then we'll see where he's going to be. But he's a very big and solid, steady defender defensively, but his offensive game is definitely underrated and could pop off at some point. So yeah, 3 picks may not look great on paper for the Maple Leafs, but they did bet on players that have high potential or possibly could pop off at any point. So that was the main philosophy not necessarily going into this draft, but how they felt about the players, where they do perform well in big situations. They have the skill set, the IQ, everything that they value as well.
I do want to mention for Malinowski, he didn't have the greatest point totals, at least in the AJHL playoffs, but the Centennial Cup, which is the champions of all the junior A leagues across like provincial junior A leagues in Canada. He was second in points at the end of it, behind only Aiden Fink. I think he was third in goals, well over a point per game in that tournament, scored 2 goals in the final in the championship match. So certainly not shy in big moments for sure, like you said there, Peter. Matt, I'll come to you next here. What are your thoughts on the Vancouver Canucks draft class this year? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I mentioned on our first round reaction that William Wallander, Tom Wallander.
William Wallander, Tom Wallander.
I've already done it a couple times.
You're not going to be the last person to mess it up. Don't worry.
Now, if the Red Wings would have picked them too, that would have been horrible for rating about these guys. But Tom Wallander, he was a great pick for the Canucks. But like I said, there's a few forwards I really liked that they could have picked. Oliver Moore being one of them. But looking at, we've talked about Wallander on this show quite a bit, and everyone knows we love him as a defenseman. So I'm of the mind that the Canucks needed this guy. Very good 2-way defenseman. Probably is going to match up really well with Quinn Hughes down the line. This pairing is going to, if Wallander hits what he's supposed to, pairing is going to be a powerhouse to go up against in the future. And I'm excited to see that, because I think those two are going to be Wallander's a bit taller, I believe, than Quinn Hughes, but these two are going to be dynamic on the back end. Wallander's much better defensively, although Hughes has gotten much better since he was drafted. But I'm excited to see that pairing. Further down, they didn't have another pick until the 3rd round. Unfortunately, they could have try to get a 2nd round pick, get some high talent. But the 3rd round pick they did have was a really good one in my mind. Hunter Bersuitz was rated to go, I believe a few rankings had him in the late 1st, and quite a few had him in the 2nd round, and he drops into the 3rd and had a really good season for the Kitchener Rangers. Another right-hand shot defenseman. Canucks really loaded up in this draft on them. But I think he has the upside of a top 4 defenseman, and he's going to be interesting to watch throughout. So he was, I think, a steal in the 3rd round getting him there. So I mean those, and then my guy Grayson Sachin, not Grayson. My gosh, I'm off on guys here. Sorry, Minio. Another Seattle Thunderbird. But yeah, sorry, Minio. He's my guy. I did his profile, and he could end up being like a Chris Tanev, Jacob Slavin type defenseman, and not a lot of offense, but really good defensively. A left shot D, but you need those two. Those three, then they had a run on defensemen, and then they got into the fourth round and went forwards, which overall I wasn't really excited with the fourth round picks. I mean, Ty Mueller was going to the draft for the third time. They could have signed him out of the NCAA next year. I mean, or they could have already signed him, I think. So, I mean, he's the guy that's, I'm not sure about him. Matthew Perkins, another guy that maybe these guys are good picks to, swing on later but I think there's just so much other skill they could have drafted in that point that I'm not really excited for the rest of their draft. I mean, they ended up getting Aiden Celebrini, who's Macklin's brother. They're trying to get him. I don't know. They'd have to really be bad next year to be able to draft him. But yeah, overall, the rest of the draft it didn't really excite me, but who knows? This is where you're not sure. You're just throwing darts, like you said, Logan. So overall, I'll rate him a B plus, maybe an A, maybe. I don't want to say A minus because the rest of there, but high B plus, borderline. Because I'm really excited about the three defensemen they drafted first.
Yeah, that was certainly a thing they needed to find some depth for in their prospect pool. Makes a lot of sense. I think Verlander is probably the top prospect in their pool now, though good starts to the year from Aatu Ratu or Jonathan Lekaramäki would go a long way in really boosting that pool. But to be honest, in the last year, they went from one of the bottom three worst prospect pools to probably in out of 32, I don't know, 20th, maybe early 20s. They've definitely started to increase that pool, which is good. I like the Brestevich pick a lot too.
I missed one guy, Vilmer Alriksson. I do like him. Big 6'6" winger and Swedish. So they have to get another Swede. There you go.
Thomas Gradin is one of their big scouts out in Europe, and he's drafted lots of Swedes for them, just like Detroit.
He may not be. So I did like that forward pick. So I'll add that in there.
Nice. So B plus then.
There you go. Closer to an A minus now. Then.
Sure. Okay. I'll quickly mention the Red Wings draft class. You guys may know I'm a big Nate Danielson guy. I think there's a really good chance that he's basically like a slower Dylan Larkin. He's got the size, he's got the two-way game. I think there's more offense than people are letting on, because you can say all you want, the offense isn't there, but look at the points. I think he was 18th in the WHL in scoring in his draft year. I know he's on the older side for this draft. He's technically almost eligible for 2022, but that's not his fault. I think he's going to be a good player. Legit 2C potential, probably. Reminds me of Dylan Cousins a bit. At the same age. Big, bad team, skates well, has good hands, and just thinks better than his teammates. Go back and watch Danielson's highlights, and you'll see him just tear through a team, pass to a teammate at a wide open net, and they miss the puck. So, he's perfect for Detroit. Just set him up with Phil Zadina, and you'll just get lots of pucks missing the net. It'll be great. And then Axel Sandin-Pellikka at 17, great value in my eyes. They could really afford to take someone who's 5'11" because the rest of their top young D-men are massive. And he plays a totally different style than Wallander, Verlander, or Edvinsson or Seider. He plays totally different than them. And the dream is for him to take over as the power play quarterback on the top power play unit, which kind of frees Seider up to play more even strength minutes and more penalty kill, stuff like that. And maybe Edvinsson as the QB on the second power play. Who knows? We'll see how they all progress. But I like that pick a lot too. Trey Augustine in the second round is a lot of fun. I think we've talked about, maybe it was on the episode of The Grind Line right before the draft, about how Augustine is the antithesis of Sebastian Cossa. He's a lot shorter, and very calm and intelligent and not the most explosive athlete. And so it's kind of like the opposite ends of the spectrum there with Kosa and Augustine, which I think is a really cool balance. Gives them another option there. And I know you guys are big Augustine fans for sure. Andrew Gibson in the second round was a good pick. Not in love with the pick, but they could use another right shot D, and he looked better as the year went on. No real intense thoughts there. Brady Cleveland, I mentioned earlier, kind of feel like that was a reach. Noah Dower Nielsen is fun to see go because his older brother Liam is a Red Wings draft pick in 2021. He's got skill, he's got a shot, but the skating is tough. He scored a ton in the top junior league in Sweden this year, though. So who knows? Maybe if that skating can catch up a bit, they could have a player there. But past that, throwing darts at the wall. Honestly, at this point, just see if something sticks. Who knows? If you have intense opinions on someone taken in like the fourth round or later, you're lying to yourself because nobody knows what these players will be. We have to wait and see. There's a massive range of potential outcomes for these guys the later it goes. So you just have to wait and see. Be patient. So that'll do it for us this week. I'll make myself stop talking about their draft class. I like it a bit. It was okay. Not super pumped, but I like the top guys, which is kind of all you need to do is hit on those top guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all for us this week. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Prospect Corner. Make sure you subscribe to the Hockey Writers YouTube channel to make sure you catch all our new episodes. And also make sure you check out our site, thehockeywriters.com, for tons of draft coverage in the coming weeks, tons of analysis looking back at it from individual teams and league-wide perspectives for the rest of the offseason, really. Thank you, Peter and Matt. As always, it was awesome doing this with you guys all year here, building up to this big moment. So thanks for being with me on this journey. And thank you all for watching this week's episode of Prospect Corner. We'll see you next time.